So, Darwin's catchphrase, like we said earlier, is that of natural selection. Okay? Darwin's idea is that things have evolved over millions and millions of years. They started out fairly simple, and as they evolved, they became more and more complex. Okay? But the way in which they did this is by natural selection, which means that nature has done the choosing, basically. Okay, this is not a man-made thing. This is not anything that people have a say in. It's not anything that we do to control it or that organisms do to control it. This is something that happens on its own, and it's driven by nature. It's a force that has been driven with kind of natural predecessing starting points and things like that. So it's nothing that anybody has control over. All right. So, like we said, he did a lot of work on the Galapagos. He spoke about natural selection. If we just think very quickly, okay, the opposite of natural selection, because this is also quite important to know, is artificial selection. Okay, and this is absolutely man-made or instigated by man, whichever way we want to term the phrase. Okay. Sorry, there we go. Artificial selection. So this is where you have people who intervene and they choose characteristics, whether it be wheat or maize or plants, or whether it be animals. Again, things like cows that are high milk-yielding cows, or chickens that lay lots of eggs, things like that. We are able to isolate those genes, even also if it's in the beginning only by using observation. Okay. And we do genetic crosses and we actually choose the characteristics that we want. Okay. But Darwin focused on natural selection, and there are basically three reasons that support this idea of natural selection. There are three reasons that we can use as evidence which supports this idea. And the first thing that causes variation, okay, under this idea of natural selection is meiosis. Okay, and meiosis, we know, is random. It also happens without any instigating factors. There is no control in terms of human intervention. There's nothing we can do to decide at this stage, just randomly eye color or hair color or things like that. So meiosis is an absolute random process. Another thing that is a random process, okay, which is linked to meiosis, is that of transfertilization. Okay, and it is in fact that. It's a chance meeting. We spoke last time when we did work more in the genetic side about the absolute astronomical odds of the same sperm cell that was used to fertilize the egg that made you being produced by your dad, and the chances of the exact same, the genetically identical egg being produced from your mom that made you. Those odds are it's 1 in millions. And now the thing is, not only does the meiosis have to happen correctly and have to happen and result in the exact same egg and sperm that made you, but now we have to rely on those egg and sperm cells meeting, which is just really at this stage, and it's a tiny, tiny, minuscule possibility. It's never happened before. So these two things, okay, link very strongly to this idea of natural selection, okay, which is not something, again, that people have a say in, and they result in variation. And the third thing that links very strongly over here is the idea of mutations. Because mutations, we also know, they are random changes in the genetic makeup of an organism. Okay, whether it be just a few changes and something that is not quite serious, and it just maybe changes eye color or hair color or things like that. And then we know that certain mutations are actually quite dangerous. Some of them are lethal. Okay, but these three things together link very closely to the idea of natural selection. So basically, what Darwin said was the following. If you have an organism, okay, and now we are speaking on species level, okay, so not just one, but there are a couple, okay? And he said if something happened and it instigated a change in the climatic factors, let's say there was a very big drought, or there was a massive flood, or global warming or cooling happened, something like that, Darwin said that nature will select the organisms that are able to adapt to that change. So a very important term over here is that of adaptation. If something happened, okay, and there was a change in the structure, or there was a change rather in the environmental pressures that had been placed on organisms, those that were able to adapt would have been the ones that survived. If you were not able to adapt to really harsh conditions like a drought or a flood, or temperature fluctuations, then he said nature would have selected basically for you not to survive. And organisms like that would have become extinct. Okay? And this is the thing. Remember, we are working here not individually. Darwin worked on that level. He was speaking about the species as a whole. So if you were able to adapt to a climatic change, that would have ensured that you were able to survive. And if not, it would have led to your extinction. Okay? Like we've said over here, Darwin focused on species level. Okay, he didn't only speak about individuals, and he didn't speak about self-will. He spoke about the fact that, again, if you were adapted because of natural selection, you would have been able to survive. You as a species, as a whole, would have been able to survive. Okay. So if we look, for example, and let's take an idea of a giraffe. It's one of the examples that they are fond of using come exam time, but they really could use anything. They could use a snake that doesn't have legs. They could speak about a tortoise. There are birds, anything. But if we think of a giraffe is something that really, it's an organism that, if we have a nice tree over here and you have lots of leaves, okay, this is an organism that has a very long neck. So basically what would have happened is, if you have to explain how a giraffe, okay, here's my little giraffe, if that giraffe, okay, was not able to feed on the grass like others, and it had to feed at the top over here, by using Darwin's explanation, you would have to say something like, there was a change in the composition of the environment, there was lots of pressure, okay, on ground level where there was grass, and lots of organisms were feeding on the grass. And what would have happened is that this giraffe would have almost been predisposed, okay, to being able to adapt to a change. And because of that, over millions of years, we would have seen a gradual change, okay, over time in the length of this giraffe's neck, which would have facilitated the idea of it now having a longer neck, because now it was able to reach leaves that were high up, and it reduced competition. So there would have been giraffes that maybe had shorter necks, but because pressure was placed on the food supply, those giraffes probably would have died out because of environmental pressure, and climatic change or environmental change could have precipitated this change. Those that were predisposed, okay, to having an adapted neck, a longer neck, would have been able to survive. It would have alleviated pressure on the food source that they had. And because of that, using Darwin's explanation, we would say nature has selected the giraffes that are most adapted to a new change and to a change in the environment, and that would have facilitated them being able to eat leaves that were high up. Okay. Whereas, and now we come to the second theorist, and that is John Baptiste de Lamarck, okay, who was also an interesting theorist. We don't really subscribe to his idea anymore today. But again, that doesn't make it, a non-worthwhile or a futile exercise. We have to have something to compare. Okay, and